I made a 7-inch round cake standing at 7 inches tall, and the cake cost exactly £171 4 pence. Now that's very debatable, but that was simply based on a research project I undertook, assuming if I was just by myself without all the equipment and support I have to help me make a cake, how efficient will I be with my time and how much will a cake cost me? So I did all that, broke that down, and I'll be linking that in the description box for you to check out. But that's just some starting information to give you some context about this video we're talking about, which is cake slices. Now, after making that cake, naturally, I wanted to cut that cake. And if you're already finding cake servings a little bit confusing, you're in good company, because I've been in it for 8 years. I thought I knew it, but like most things, you learn something new every day. So I undertook a research project, and I am beginning to find cake serving and slices and cutting guides slightly confusing. But if it's your first time here, hello and welcome. My name is Gladys, baker and cake artist, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. Occasionally, I have resorted to doing sit-down videos. So today we're not making a cake at all, but there's a catalog of videos on this channel packed with helpful tips and practical guide to help you navigate through this journey of baking and decorating quite easily. But back to today's subject, we're talking cake servings. I have cake dummies, I have cake circles, I have samples here to give you visual references, but I can just about tell you cake serving guides are confusing. And if you thought that was news to you, stop this video for a minute and Google cake serving guide. You'll find different information that I guess are valid in their own way, but are not related in whatsoever, because one 6-inch cake will derive your different servings. And I guess there are different factors that may influence the outcome. So to start with, I will say, if you're finding difficulty with the recommended cake serving guides that are already on the market, please be reassured that you can derive your own servings based on your own experiences and the cake you bake and how you derive your servings from it. You don't have to really rely on specific serving guides that are out there, but I guess they do serve a purpose. So back to this video I made. Having made the cake, priced it, I thought I will cut it. But like I said, that was also part of a research project. So I had a few other cakes, all of which were 7-inch, but with varying height. One thing you will find very quickly that influences the cuttings or servings of a cake also will include the height of the cake. So I had a 7-inch round cake that stood at 7 inches tall. Unfortunately, none of these cake dummies stands at 7 inches. I think my tallest is about 6 inch, which is this 6-inch cake standing at 6 inches tall. And there is the regular size of 5 inches tall over here. But a 7-inch tall cake, and I have made a video about the cuttings of that cake also, which I'll link in the video. So for reference, you can go back and watch that video. So that was a 7-inch cake that stood at a tall 7-inch height. But cutting it, I wasn't quite sure, because compared to some other 7-inch round cakes I was working with on the day, I have three 7-inch round cakes total. One stood at 7 inches tall, which is this cake I'm talking about, pieces of which is here. And then there was a red velvet 2-layered standing at 5 inches, and a banana and cinnamon cake that stood at 5 inches. The red velvet I cut into wedges, and I got myself 10 medium-sized wedges. When I cut the banana cake into grid or row cuttings, I had 17, and a few scattered slices could add up to a large 18th portion. So that round cake gave me 17 to 18 portions, and it was the same for the 7-inch cake standing at 7 inches tall. I had myself 16, 17, 18 maximum slices, totally adding up to the number of slices. That is if I left the cake slices in their full height. Mind you, this is 7-inch. I'll leave that subject for a minute, and I'll come back to this 7-inch cake that has become the main subject of discussion today. However, to look back at the reasons why cake servings may be confusing, it generally depends on location and how you wish to serve your cake as well. I find that the UK servings are slightly different from the American servings. But having said that, I have also seen or noticed content creators who are American and are using the grade or row servings that most cake bakers use in the UK. So I guess the wedge row servings is neither location specific anymore. It all depends on how you cut your cake and what you want to derive from it. Another thing influencing a specific serving of a cake is not just the size of the cake in terms of the round shape of the cake, but the height. Cakes have evolved over time, going from the standard 4 to 5 inches height, and have developed into recent trends of taller cakes and double barrel cakes. We're looking at 6-inch, 7-inch cakes that are taller, to double barrel cakes that stands at 9 inches to 11 inches in height. So depending on how tall your cakes are, sizes are going to be different. So if you ask the generic question, how many servings will I derive from a 6-inch cake? That question almost seems incomplete, because 6-inch may refer to its size in terms of width or general diameter, but how tall the cake is what's going to determine the servings or final cuttings for you. And you will find that when we come back to the subject of this cake standing at 7 inches tall. Having said that though, whatever your servings are related to a specific cake, you'll find that quoting it for a customer is just for reference and for a guide to help you derive a price that may match the cake. But what a customer does preferably with themselves when you hand over the cake to them is up to them. With my cake serving guide, which is part of my cake care sheets that I hand to customers, I give them every information, including encouraging them to cut the cake with a sharp knife that is dipped in hot water. That will lead to the cake cutting cleanly, because I cover my cakes in ganache before a layer of fondant is added. That is if it's a fondant cake. But if it's a fully ganache cake, the ganache sets solid on the cake. So using a blunt knife is going to cause the cake to crumble, which may reduce the servings for the cake customer. So that is just a bit of information over there. But coming back to this particular cake that I was cutting, I had 17 to 18 servings, but because the cake stood at 7 inches tall, it struck me as though perhaps I should cut them into finger portions. And these were the slices I derived just for reference over here. So the full grid portions that I cut, which are the finger slices, they're a bit more cube if you like. This is what you're looking at. That is 7 inches in height, but this is about 1.3 to 1.5 inches in terms of width. But in the UK, the grid or row settings are set in the finger portions or party portions. The finger portions, for reference, is something like this, which is a cube of at least about 1 inch in width over here, or a rectangle more like, which is the party serving. So the finger portions are mostly for weddings, and then you have the party portions, which are the larger portions. So depending on how you quote for your cake, you might get less servings for one cake if you're using party set portions, or you might get more servings for the cake if you're using the wedding or finger portions. So for references, this is what the cake is supposed to look like. Compared, if I compare this particular 1 inch over here to this cake, you can see the difference. Oh, I've left this cake at room temperature, so it is melted a little bit. But say if I compared my cake here, you're looking at 5 inches in height, but this stands at 7 inches when I leave it in its full height. And as you can see, this paper right here representing the finger portion is just 1 inch to in width, but placing it on the cake, you can see I'm a little over 1 inch here. We're looking at 1.3 inches, 1.2 inches. I say that to say, for you to be able to follow a specific serving guide to its specific measurement, you will have to be very pedantic to make sure that you stay within the cutting requirements, which sometimes can be a bit unrealistic, especially if you have a lot going on in the kitchen. If you're a cake maker making the cake, chances are you're not the one going to be cutting the cake. And if you're delivering it at a venue, perhaps the kitchen staff or chefs in the kitchen are going to cut the cake. So sometimes I like to leave room for the cake for a few adjustments, for want of a better word, and I'll be explaining that in a moment. But just to explain how difficult getting the specific servings are, having tried 3 different 7-inch round servings that derived me about 17 to 18 portions, when I tried to use the general serving guide and a ruler to derive the servings, I couldn't get equal portions based on that, even on a card and on using greaseproof paper. I even tried to derive some of these measurements on my cake dummies, and it was really difficult. So it goes to show that the representations that may be made on paper may not always transform in its actual sizes. So yet again, for your reassurance, determine your own cake prices perhaps on a reasonable measurement. I think for me, I find that the finger servings are generally very unrealistic, and with trends changing and cake servings evolving, it is not unusual that most cake makers are quickly finding their own ways of cutting their cakes and serving it according to what is suitable for their circumstances. So for my cake that ended up being 7 inches in height, I decided to cut them into half portions of that, which gave me smaller servings. And what this does is that it stops the waste of cakes, especially say for children's cake. If you give a child this bigger cake, perhaps that is too big and might go to waste. But if you cut them into half the portions, then you have the same portions but double to serve a lot more. So if someone had a cake and wanted more, they have the option to come back for more. And if they wanted, if they didn't want to waste their cake, they will probably stick to a slice that they thought would be suitable for them. So for me though, when I am making my serving recommendations, I am careful not to stick with a particular number. Like I said earlier, I leave room for adjustment. So for instance, for the 7-inch that I have tried and tested over 3 cakes, knowing that it derives me up to 7 to 18 servings, my recommended serving guide, if I were to go by long portions, for instance, I would suggest maybe 15 to 18, which means that there is a window of opportunity for the client if they decided to cut a little bigger or fell outside of the specific recommendation. There is still room to wiggle. So for the cake that gave me 17 long slices, that would be 15 to 18 slices. And if I decided to cut them into half shaped, which gave me 36 slices, that will be 30 to 35 slices or 36 slices. So if you're having trouble with your cake servings, I am here to encourage you to say, perhaps experiment with your own cakes, sizes, and tailor them to your business and cut them accordingly so that you can be able to quote from your experience and business for the customer. Hopefully the information out there used by other cake makers will always serve as inspiration and a guide for you. But ultimately, like cake prices, some of these things are very nuanced and customized to each individual business. And that is my experience having undertaken this project, from pricing to cutting this cake. So the information about the decorating process for this cake and cutting it is also linked in a full-length video, but I thought I'll come here to give you some extra information about the servings and to encourage you that if you're finding problems or having difficulty understanding your own serving options and guide for customers, then perhaps you shouldn't be too disheartened by it, because it's an individual thing for every single business. I think I'll be back in the future to give you my very specific serving portions for all the cakes that I have made or experimenting over time, just so that you have something to look back on. On my research for this subject matter, I found out that there's a ton of information about serving, and one is not better or worse than the other. So it all depends on you, how you cut your cake, and what you want to derive. But always remember that besides the diameter of the cake, there is also the height to consider. Cakes are customized specifically these days to suit specific servings. Previously, to serve 30 or 40, one would consider a 2-tier cake. Now, a single tier 6-inch cake with 6 layers will perhaps serve up to 30 or more. So for that matter, cake servings are highly individualized and custom set to each business. So take a chance and go try. But one thing I found with these ones is that it hasn't worked out as I wanted to, but I am happy and confident in the serving numbers I derive for my 7-inch cake. I'll be linking that in the description box below. But there's more to learn about cake servings, but in summary, cake servings are very personalized to you and your business. Take what is already out there with a pinch of salt and apply it to yours as a guide, and define your own cake serving so that you are confident to be able to use that during your pricing formula for customers. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.